Hi again. Walter Rauschenbusch has been discussing the property and the financial situation of the church, especially the urban church, in 1907. He goes on, the danger just described has been averted usually by the fact that in the larger cities, where there is more than one church of a denomination, the wealthier families do not remain in the poorer churches, but gravitate toward churches composed in the main of their own class. Water seeks its level, and so do men. If a young man rises to wealth, and if he and his wife have social ambitions, or if they have intellectual and aesthetic tastes, the wealthy church attracts them. If a man from Christian motives remains in a church of poorer people and bears its burdens, he may find that undesirable associations threaten his growing children there. There are 100 perfectly natural and legitimate reasons to recommend a transfer of membership to the more congenial surroundings. As fast as the social extremes draw apart and society stratifies in classes, the churches will pass through the same process. The very democracy of our intercourse in America makes it the more inevitable. But this situation creates the same problem of dependence on a larger scale. The poorer churches become financially dependent on those which contain the wealth of the denomination. If a small church becomes a mission of a wealthy church, it thereby secures volunteer workers and a safe budget, but it loses its independence and something of its virility. If a city mission organization undertakes the support of the poorer churches, it is certain to draw its income chiefly from the wealthy churches, and the situation will again be essentially the same. We shouldn't forget that Rauschenbusch writes many of his best pages while he's working in New York City, in one of the worst sections of New York City in those days, which was Hell's Kitchen, as we called it a little later. The inequality of wealth affects the churches on a still larger scale. Most denominations have a few very wealthy supporters. The yearly balance of the great denominational boards and institutions may depend on the single-handed contributions of these large givers. The initiative in the larger religious enterprises will fall on them. If they hitch their steam tug to the denominational canal boat, it will float away to a prosperous voyage. If they hold off, it will stick on the mud bank of poverty, and all the poling of the crew may not get it afloat. They may, and often do, use their vast powers very wisely to develop the latent resources of their denomination. But it is at least conceivable that men whose character has been molded by commercialism may be guided by points of view very alien from the Christian spirit, and that personal dislikes or class prejudices may decide questions of the greatest spiritual importance. Thus, the mere fact of great inequality of wealth injects a monarchical element into denominations with democratic government, and in bodies with episcopal government it creates a financial episcopacy back of the bishops. Then there is always the danger of change. The rich man may grow weary of the constant demands on his help and the disheartening experiences of untruthfulness and parasitism which he is bound to make, and may slacken in his giving. It is not as delightful to be a god on a small scale as outsiders think. Or the children of the rich man may be debilitated by the atmosphere of wealth and be more interested in orchids or art curios than in the church their father and mother love so well. Or they may follow the drift of their social set toward the ritualistic churches, which offer more aesthetic satisfaction and bring to this country some of the social prestige and antique grandeur which they have in older countries. In any of these contingencies, the revenues of an entire denomination, which have been adjusted to these important contributions, may be upset, and its missionary policies at home and abroad may suffer calamitous retrenchment. If wealth is in a few hands, there is the pleasant possibility of very large and swift benefactions, but there is also a constant danger of instability. The safest income is from the moderately wealthy. There is more to say, but this will suffice to show that the financial welfare of the churches is bound up with the economic health of society, and that its perils increase as wealth accumulates in few hands and the social extremes draw farther apart. Moreover, the finances of the church have always affected its constitution and inner life in the subtlest ways. The bishops probably rose to power in the early church, first of all, by controlling the purse strings of the churches. One cause for the rise of the papacy was the large wealth early controlled by the Bishop of Rome. The history of the church in the Middle Ages and its struggles with the secular powers were largely due to the fact that the church was a great landowner and fought for its income. The corruptions of the papacy and its financial extortions, which alienated the northern nations and prepared them for the schism of the Reformation, were due in part to the economic changes of the 14th and 15th centuries. The financial necessities of the church even created new sacramental observances, and indirectly the doctrines based on them. In the Reformation, financial interests played a decisive part throughout. The democratic polity of the various congregational bodies, which is most in harmony with the genius of American life, grew up in homogeneous bodies of plain people. It works best where social equality is greatest. Its essence is imperiled as soon as equality departs. Financial changes are apt to involve far more than anyone foresees at the time. When financial control shifts, other elements and functions of church life are sure to shift with it. The church surely has an interest at stake in the distribution of social wealth. Put a link into Martin Hengel's discussion of property, land, and equality in ancient Israel.